there's two sides of this mask debate, and even though that, I'm all for Texas opening up 100%. I think we worked really hard to get to that point, if not to 75%. But I'm not going to see the full 100% because I'm going to have guests who take this seriously, will come and will require masks, and I have the other guests who will say, you know what, I don't think we need to wear masks. This is silly, and they're not going to dine at my establishment. So we're back to square one where it's 50-50.
Mike, that's an interesting point because the governor and others will say, listen, we have small business owners' backs here. But you're saying, and you said you've heard similar from other business owners, that, I mean, is it that customers would prefer to some degree that you keep the mask mandate up? In other words, they'd be more comfortable coming with masks than without? Is that what you're finding?
Absolutely. I will say that the governor doesn't have us Texans' interests at play at this point. I think it's more of a personal interest. I think his decision to drop the mask mandate is selfish and cowardly, and that there's no reason to do it. That dropping the mask mandate will not help the economy, will not help us open. And a lot of us feel that he's putting a lot of us in danger. He's at a time where we need him to be a leader. He's not being a leader. The leader needs to make hard decisions. The leader needs to lead. And he's basically saying, you know what, we're going to leave the decision on y'all, because if something goes wrong, it's going to be on y'all. It has nothing to do with me. Even with the freeze, he blamed windmills. He blamed frozen generators. He never took accountability of what happened. He didn't even try to help us. He just went on Twitter and said, 500,000 people have their power back, and it's ridiculous. And even back when we had our first surge back in May, he opened up the state way too soon. He saw what happened and was blaming restaurants, gyms, and everybody else except for himself. So Greg Abbott doesn't have the Texas people's interests in play. He, cares about himself at this point.
Mike, you've been battling cancer. You have lymphoma. So your battle for your business has also been a battle for your life, for your health. I can't imagine being in your shoes going through this and then having to hear, well, no one has to wear masks anymore, which if that were in your restaurant and you had to let people in without masks, you'd really be compromised.
Correct. I was almost devastated when I heard the news, just because, this year has been tough on me. And, not only dealing with the stress of, with my sickness, it's also dealing with the stress that comes with COVID, the anxiety of that. And just trying to have to adapt to try to keep my business alive. Obviously, my business and my health kind of goes down the side because that's what's going to provide me, my medical expenses and all that. So, I even shut down for 6 months earlier this year, and it got to the point where, I had to reopen to kind of keep the business alive, and my biggest thing is if we have another surge and we get a setback, my business may not survive this.
Yeah. Final question, if I can. Some business owners have told us that they're now put in a uncomfortable position, to say the least, of having to confront customers, right? In other words, that you're now the enforcers, right, for mask requests in your restaurants because the mandate's been lifted. I wonder if you've had to confront that.
I personally haven't had to deal with that yet. I kind of see it may happen. It's just we've been through this for a long time now, and we're all kind of, our emotions are high right now. And the fact that if people are ready to go back to some type of normalcy, and, confrontation is going to happen. We see it all the time on the internet where people go to stores and, they flip out throwing groceries on the floor because they have to wear a mask, and it's sad that we can't just respect each other's, what we're going through in each other's spaces. We're all in this together at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that we're not going to be able to get past this. We're so close to the end of the light of the tunnel that, we're just so close to be there. And my other thing is, with this confrontation, since I'm an Asian Americans, we've seen a lot of attacks on Asian Americans, and that's a huge concern for me because I have a bullseye on my back, and that, we see all these instances of that, and it's just opportunity, and
yeah, we don't want to add.
It opens up that opportunity.
Yeah, we don't want to add that to your experience.
I hope everybody's realized by now, these masks make a difference. We are on the cusp of being able to fundamentally change the nature of this disease because of the way in which we're able to get vaccines in people's arms. We've been able to move that all the way up to the end of May to have enough for every American, to get every adult American to get a shot. And the last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime, everything's fine, take off your mask, forget it. It's still
Continue looking for this man in connection with an anti-Asian hate crime in Harlem. They say the suspect pushed a 27-year-old man last month as he walked to his car. When the victim asked why, police say the suspect made anti-Asian comments, punched the man in the face, and then took off.
Hundreds gathered to take a stand against hate crimes targeting Asian communities. There's mounting fear as the number of violent incidents increases. CBS 2's Andrea Klein-Thomas explains.
We're not COVID. We're not the China virus. We are Americans. We are proud Asian Americans.
Hundreds of people from all backgrounds gathered at the steps of the Executive and Legislative Building in Nassau County, calling for an end to the violence and bias against Asian communities across the country.
We cannot have the ugly and painful history repeat itself again.
In New York City, according to the NYPD, there were 3 anti-Asian hate crimes in 2019. That jumped to 29 in 2020 and already 7 this year.
How's this happening? Why weren't you better prepared for this?
Mayor de Blasio was asked about the city's response on Face the Nation.
We have a task force made up of Asian American police officers out in communities, finding the people who did it, making sure there's consequences.
Statistics only begin to tell the story as residents say most incidents go unreported, and growing fear has people changing how they're going about their everyday lives.
I feel like very unsafe these days.
We met Melanie Lau at another rally Sunday in Sunset Park, Brooklyn.
Even now, I heard like in the daylight, in the afternoon, people get robbed or attacked.
From violence to biased remarks and even offensive jokes, residents say enough is enough and urge people to show their support by speaking up. Andrea Klein-Thomas, CBS 2 News.
Go to your own country.
Attacks on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or APIs, have gone viral. And in some incidents, the perpetrators are Black, leading to some in the API community to address anti-Black sentiment.
When we put other communities of color down, when we encourage other communities of color to be overrepresented in the criminal justice system, we're really just upholding or uplifting white supremacy.
Community leaders want to dispel stereotypes like the criminality of Black people and that Asians are the source of COVID. There is an intertwined history between the API and Black communities. In the LA riots of the 90s, tensions rose between Korean immigrant business owners and Black Americans after a 14-year-old Black girl was shot and killed by a Korean convenience store owner who thought she was stealing a bottle of orange juice. Asian American Studies professor Janelle Wong says we can learn from this history.
Today, Korean Americans are among the most racially progressive when it comes to for instance, support for Black Lives Matter, and when it comes to the government doing more to create equal rights between Blacks and whites.
It took years of coalition building between the Korean American and Black community leaders.
When you have narratives that attempt to divide each other, what you're doing is distracting the root causes to what's impacting both of those communities.
Both communities have felt the impact of the pandemic, whether it's job losses, food shortages, or seeking mental health care. Experts say the fight for resources is pitting communities against each other when they could work together.
Historically, the AAPI community has benefited from the Black community's fight for civil rights. And many AAPI now, especially the younger generation, understand that our liberation is always bound up with the Black community and other communities of color, and we can't make gains without working together.
Local leaders suggest the two communities join forces to push for resources as an alternative to more policing. And that includes youth job placement and investing in anti-poverty programs.
Last year, coinciding with the pandemic, there has been a significant rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. In many cases, the elderly have been targeted. And Eyewitness News reporter Sid Garcia looks at what's being done about it.
It's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop.
The number of hate incidents in this country continues to grow, both in numbers as well in severity.
One of the ugly trends during the pandemic has been the increase in hate crimes against the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. There have been cases caught on video of physical and verbal assaults. According to the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at Cal State San Bernardino, from 2019 to 2020, hate crimes against Asian Americans in Los Angeles more than doubled, from 7 in 2019 to 15 in 2020. Overall hate crime during the same period went up 9%. These advocacy groups gathered near downtown LA calling for action to prevent crimes. They point out it's something all of us can do by watching out for one another.
I think it's about educating ourselves about each other, including each other in our community, and understanding that we are here, we've been here, and we're part of our neighborhoods.
The people here say they want the next state attorney general to be a member of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. They're also offering resources such as mental health and legal help to hate crime victims. One of the things the group suggested we all do is simply reach out and get to know one another.
There's a demonstration on Boston Common today to call attention to recent attacks on the Asian community all across the country. Hundreds of people turned out. Organizers and group leaders urged the crowd to keep the spotlight on the rising number of attacks against Asian Americans. It also helped raise money for the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Community Fund, an initiative to help those targeted by
It is a mild Friday night in Chinatown, where you can still dance without abandon in front of bright lights. Where you can still find dark silhouettes of a table tennis game in the corner of a park. But beneath it all, there is now fear gripping the neighborhood.
In normal times, I would be going for an outdoor run, grabbing groceries, grabbing dinner, something like that. And I don't do that anymore.
Jennifer Tam is the co-founder of the grassroots organization Welcome to Chinatown, so you could say it's an occupational hazard for her to see the light. Lately, though, there's been a lot of darkness.
It's impossible to go around the neighborhood without sensing some sort of fear, seeing what has happened to friends, to our elderly community.
And that was before the violent stabbing just a stone's throw away from where she lives. A 36-year-old Asian American man randomly stabbed in his back with an 8-inch kitchen knife on Worth Street. The suspect, charged with attempted murder as a hate crime. The victim tonight in a medically induced coma with major damage to his liver and losing a kidney. The knife lodged in his back, preventing him from bleeding out, may end up saving his life if he can pull through this. Tam says after that vicious assault last night, waking up today felt different.
The fact that it happened to a younger man And I've already been trying to deal and grapple with the fact that our elderly community has been targeted, but to now recognize that this really could happen to anybody.
We have to stop Asian hate. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock at Federal Plaza, there's a rally. I'll be there.
The mayor today announcing he will stand with the community at a rally that had been planned for weeks when the troubling trend of violence against Asian Americans began to rear its ugly head. The mayor being there, it's a start. The question is, when will this end, and why is this happening?
I wish I had a good answer for it, but I too have been asking myself that a lot.
In Chinatown,
I don't even think about coming down the street by myself.